Sagaga is the head of Human Rights and Safety Department of the International Federation of Journalists, the IFJ. He now joins us via Skype from Brussels in Belgium. A very good evening to you, Mr. Sagaga. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, what's your reaction to the latest developments?
Well, it turning up to be as worrying and worrying as we feared. If a journalist went into a court to arrange a paperwork for his meeting and ended up being killed and cut to pieces, is a cause of major concern. Unfortunately, it will only be the latest of many incidents which claim the lives of journalists. So we are very much concerned. We're also determined to see that action is taken in this case as in many cases in the past.
Before his disappearance, he was reportedly on self-imposed exile in the United States. What have you heard with regards to that, and what's your reaction to it? Why was he in exile?
As we understand, he was not in exile. He went to the U.S. following the crackdown in Saudi Arabia. But he never viewed himself as a dissident or opponent, was simply continuing his work as with one of the best-known newspapers in the world, the Washington Post. So, as far as we can tell, there was nothing he was doing other than doing his job of reporting on things of public interest from his own country.
Well, President Donald Trump has just tweeted a few minutes ago that Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, has already met with the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, but then nothing of substance came out of that. What do we know? What have you heard with regards to that meeting?
Well, we know that there have been meetings with the King and then the Crown Prince with the Secretary of State Pompeo, but also he learned from the Turkish authorities that they have now new evidence which suggests that Mr. Khashoggi was actually killed and cut in pieces. That's a new piece of information which came out today, which of course confirms the fears that have been growing over the last fortnight that he may actually have been killed. Now, this could actually confirm the guy is no longer alive. And if that is the case, even if the authorities in Saudi Arabia are saying that they are going to expand on the inquiry, I'm afraid now there is very little hope that he will be found alive.
You know, this Jamal Khashoggi case is proving a very critical test for U.S. diplomacy. I mean, for instance, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has got so many options, one of which he could remain on the offensive, leaving Saudi Arabia and potentially the U.S. administration and then squirming in the court of world opinion, or he could use the Saudis' miscalculation to bargain, of course, to Turkey's advantage.
I think you put the finger on the right word. That is the word opinion. This should not be a matter only for Turkey or Saudi Arabia. This should be a matter for the whole world to bring pressure to bear on Saudi Arabia to come up and say exactly what happened. And if indeed Mr. Khashoggi was killed, then for those who are behind it, not only those who killed him, but also those who ordered his killing to be held accountable.
And the fact that he walked into another country's consulate, I mean, that country, we all know an embassy or a consulate or a high commission is very sovereign land. So what does that tell you about the protection of journalists doing about their work at a foreign or sovereign land?
Well, first of all, he did not walk into a foreign land. I mean, he went into the Saudi Arabia consulate in Istanbul, which is the sovereign territory of Saudi Arabia in that country. And unfortunately, as your piece before in the introduction made it clear, many journalists are killed while covering their own communities, countries, and cities. So in this case, this guy was killed inside or on the territory of Saudi Arabia, even if it was in Turkey, for having reported on matters to do with Saudi Arabia. So it only goes to prove that most of our colleagues are killed not because they are covering war or armed conflicts, but simply because some people would like to suppress free speech and would like to keep hidden things like corruption or organized crime.
Is the journalism profession under threat? I mean, what is being done to protect journalists? There is legislation to protect journalists, but then journalists disappear almost every single day. Journalists are murdered, and no justice is being seen to be done.
That's correct. Unfortunately, we have many resolutions. We have a considerable body law which should protect journalists in terms of human rights law, in terms of international law, in terms of national law. What is missing is the implementation of those laws. No one or very few people, very few countries are willing to live up to their obligations and enforce those laws. That's why my organization has been campaigning for many years for the protection, the greater protection of journalists, especially nowadays where we see that violence against journalists has reached record levels. So because of our campaign, we have been able to secure, along with partner organizations, important milestones like 2 Security Council resolutions dedicated to the protection of journalists. But unfortunately, all those resolutions, along with many other declarations, all put obligation on states to implement them. And so far, very few have been able to do so.
Just yesterday, there were unconfirmed reports coming from all fronts that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be making or issuing a statement or a report with regards to what exactly happened to Mr. Khashoggi. But 24 hours later, nothing of substance is still coming forth. Are we likely to see or to know what exactly happened?
I think we know enough from the Turkish authorities to fear the worst. What remains to be seen is what can be done if and when. It's only a matter of when before the Saudi authorities actually come up and acknowledge and admit to the killing of these journalists, Mr. Jamal Khashoggi. And therefore, the problem is, or the question is before us, both us as journalists, but also the entire community, the entire world community, is what can be done to make sure that there is an end to impunity for crime targeting journalists. That's what we need to work on, and for that we need to mobilize within our community, journalist community, but also within our countries and our region and our world to put pressure, maximum pressure on states so that they can begin to enforce the laws which will protect journalists when they actually go about informing the public about matters of public interest.
Mr. Sagaga, I hate indulging myself in speculation, but other unconfirmed reports are to the effect that Mr. Khashoggi's body was cut up in pieces within the embassy, within the consulate, because we saw a footage or a picture of him walking in towards the consulate, but then no picture of him walking out. And then there are other reports, of course, that it's actually a tweet that have been doing the rounds on social media of cleaners walking towards the consulate before the investigators could actually come in and do their work.
Well, look, we have to wait until there is confirmation, of course. But really, there is very little doubt now that this journalist who has been missing for a fortnight now, and with what the Turkish authorities are saying and the evidence to which they are pointing, I think there is very little doubt that he actually is no longer alive. And therefore, the question before us is, when this news is confirmed, what do we do about it?
Mr. Sagaga, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. Ernest Sagaga is the head of Human Rights and Safety Department of the International Federation of Journalists, the IFJ. This is the Globe on SABC News. We'll take a short break now. We'll be right back.